Okay, hold on. So I spent the summer in Istanbul. I don't know at what point I found out about Istanbul and started getting like really intrigued by it, but I do know that for the past like 2 years I'd spent just a lot of time on Pinterest looking at pictures of Turkey and just getting like so fascinated by it. I think what kind of sparked my curiosity was this idea of being between Europe and Asia and having this city where one side of the city is in Asia and the other side of the city is in Europe and they're connected by a bridge. I find that so fascinating and it's entirely unique in that way. Also, you know, the hummus was a big factor in my wanting to go there. Then this one day in February I was visiting my friend Roisin, who was stuck at home because she was awaiting a surgery. And I brought her some food, we were hanging out, and I was telling her I had this like ridiculous plan to go hang out in Istanbul. And Roisin just went, "Hey, can I come with you?" And I was like, "Oh my god, yes." And that was the whole conversation. Add to this, at the time, like me and Roisin were like friends, but we weren't like best friends. We weren't like friends who would reasonably like decide to go spend 6 weeks together in a different city where they didn't know anyone else. But we just did, and it was great, and it was such like an interesting and fun way to get to know someone. She ended up being like the perfect traveling companion. Like our travel styles are very similar. We're very like relaxed and we don't plan very much and like to keep it a bit spontaneous. And also we were perfect traveling companions because we were both disabled. There were a lot of days where I had to stay in bed the whole day and I never felt like guilty about not being able to like go out every night or whatever, because she also like understood how chronic illness works, so she had very reasonable expectations for how lively company I was going to be and vice versa. Like being able to move through that time and that summer in a kind of like semi-low-key way with another person who was also able to like get on that buzz was really lovely. I'll admit that I never fully got to the bottom of Turkey. I mean this in the sense that in drafting these videos and in trying to come up with some terribly clever cultural observations, I came up with essentially very little. Upon my return, people would ask me what it was like, what the culture felt like, what my trip had felt like. And it was really hard to pinpoint it to just one thing. I think it's because Turkey is a country that doesn't so much have a different plot as much as a different narrative structure altogether. It's not a country that has come to different answers, it's a country that's asking different questions entirely. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm going to try and explain. Here's the thing about Istanbul. It's liberal, trendy, vibrant, diverse and youthful, while also being conservative, religious and somewhat militaristic. Which, as a bunch of things together, is kind of hard to process in a lot of ways. I think the thing that really hit me was it just felt more. Like it just felt so much. The muchness of it is its most defining feature in some ways. Something that really impressed me and Roisin as people who come from a city where rent prices are highest in Europe and there isn't enough houses to go around is that here people could afford to live. Young people could afford rent to open businesses, and that kind of meant that between mosques and traditional spaces there were kind of hipstery restaurants and gay bars and a wine bar slash bookshop and antique map shops and fancy pen shops and incidental galleries and like cafes dedicated to photographers or like cats or whatever.
Vegetarian and vegan meatballs and Turkish food kısır and homemade lemonade and left wrapping.
Left wrapping?
Yes.
Istanbul is a city of reinvention, I guess. A city where people can afford to be creative, where the enterprising coexists with the ancient. And nobody I encountered was just one or the other. Like, it wasn't like there was like the traditionalists and the innovators. It was this hodgepodge where everyone was like a mix of the two. And all these conflicting ideas clashed, but in these really interesting, unexpected ways and in these really interesting, unexpected combinations. Court. I feel like I've given court a new definition. Sure. Did you have one eyeliner wing drawn? Yes! I just went around, you couldn't open mine, so I just went around ringing all the doorbells, seeing if people are like, "Do you have Bouchon?" Nope, not a person home. Except for one couple who were in the middle of a big old fight.
I think it's fucking further down than it was.
Got it open.
I've got an Ataturk on my mug.
An Ataturk on my mind.
Granddaddy of Turk. Ladies and gentle beings and everyone in between.
Do you want to get video? And it's like the way she works the camera is amazing. It's like this model doing like 5 million different poses in like 30 seconds.
I'm already drunk.
Elini salladım değdirirken İnkisar eyledim yar yar burçak ekere İlahi kaynana ömrü tükene Amına kızdan ne zoruymuş burçak yanması Burçaklar
There are so many people throughout history who have claimed that Istanbul is the greatest city on earth, and I could see why. It genuinely felt like the center of the universe. It felt so old and so big and so central to the earth in a way that made Paris or New York seem small and bland in comparison. It was absolute chaos in the way that the world is absolute chaos. It was millions of people in thousands of languages shouting over each other to be heard. Istanbul is a cacophony. Istanbul is big and overwhelming. I'll admit I was genuinely overwhelmed at first. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know what to wear or what to say. Should I dress more conservatively? Should I pretend to be straight if it comes up? I was afraid of offending, and a little bit afraid in general, to be honest. And I never did work it out. Ultimately though, I came to the conclusion that perhaps the feeling of like subtle dissonance with Istanbul was not a separation from it, but very much to the mood of it. Nobody is the perfect Istanbulite because nobody there is the same. While there, we spoke to Kurdish classicists, evangelicals, an Iraqi guy who was raised in Texas and served in the US military, a hipster who ran a retro-vegetarian cat cafe, a Hindu and Jewish couple, passionate secular nationalists and very liberal Muslims, none of whom could claim to feel like insiders, but all of whom felt that Istanbul was the perfect place for them. We all travel in search of different things. I think when I travel, I almost want to enter into a different reality. I travel because I'm searching for these different fantasies, and I love to get into them and to, I don't know, when I go away I almost pretend as if home doesn't exist. I like to feel like a completely different person. Well, not a completely different person, but maybe the person that I am, because sometimes you can recognize yourself more out of context. I kind of like to submerge myself in the feeling of a place. I kind of do it by using the cliches. If I was in Italy, for example, I would go every morning to buy vegetables at the market and imagine that I'm a Neapolitan woman. And even though these ideas are very stereotypical and not at all the real experience of an Italian or a French person, they are kind of the fantasy that you can indulge in when you go to these places. I think the thing that was about Istanbul that was interesting was that it was very hard for me to insert myself into a fantasy of the Turkish life and of the Istanbul person. It wasn't immediately clear to me what the fantasy was, what the stereotype was, because in many ways there isn't a typical Istanbul experience or Istanbul life. There were little things like drinking Turkish coffee and having Turkish breakfasts, things like hospitality and haggling and the life of a street, like just the sheer liveliness of public spaces, staying out late and drinking herbal teas or smoking hookah or whatever, surrounded by just like generations and generations hanging out with each other at like midnight because no one ever goes to sleep. But it was hard for me to pinpoint a character or to pinpoint a philosophy that I felt was like intrinsically Istanbul. And I think it's probably due to the fact that in such an ancient city, that is a city that is the meeting point of so many worlds, reducing it to one thing or to one cliche would be actually really hard. It's hard to get into the rhythm of Istanbul because it's more of a cacophony than a song. So you can't come and play along. You can only come as you are. and you accept the slight discomfort of living in a world where such different ideas and beliefs and reality live on top of one another. You grow addicted to it, to the cacophony, to the uncertainty, to the daily surprise, to being in a place where you wake up every day not knowing what the city will be. And the confusion that at first feels alienating becomes so suddenly addictive, so seemingly profound, that you never want to leave.